What is going on, guys? Happy Wednesday, and welcome to the live stream. How's it going, Dmitry?
It's going very well, Devin. How are you doing yourself?
Well, wonderful, thanks. Thanks for joining us. Freshly back from vacation, right into a live stream, which will be good. We just seconds ago before we started, we were just joking because you're in a different time zone. So I'm like, yeah, you're 3 hours into the future, and it was kind of funny. But we're also talking about the future of reef keeping, so it's kind of fitting.
Yes, I happen to have traveled in the last 2 weeks to be on two different oceans. I was in Nova Scotia, so Atlantic Ocean, and I got to dip in that one. And then I was in Costa Rica in the Pacific Ocean, just a few days later. And I was stung by a jellyfish.
I was just going to ask if you got out to some reefs. So it sounds like you definitely had some water time.
There was some water time. I did surfing.
Nice.
And didn't really see any creatures. I saw some sea lions in the Atlantic where the cold water is, and I only felt a jellyfish in the Pacific.
Do you know what kind of jellyfish it was? Was it bad or not too bad?
It was pretty much like being stung by a wasp. So
okay, not pleasant.
And it happened twice, and it was quite unpleasant. So I had to evacuate the water just for that evening.
That sucks. I'm sorry to hear about the unfortunate jelly part, but I guess happens. Yeah, good trip otherwise.
It was excellent. So it was great to be out there and just see everybody. Yeah,
that's awesome. So, future of reef keeping. Where do you think we're going in the next year? Hurdles, challenges. I mean, you sell corals as well, so you got the vendor aspect of things. But have you, just out of curiosity, where things currently are, versus a year ago or today or upcoming? Do you think there's any big changes that you've seen on the horizon?
Yeah, I've been. Well, how long you've been reefing now, Devin?
Probably a good 10 years or so. Blind guess.
Yeah, so I think I'm roughly the same. So I think maybe 12 or 13 years of hardcore reefing, but before that, whole life of fish keeping.
Yep.
And if we look back, I think first of all, there's been so many big milestones with the reefing. There was the LED and everything that came with that, and then I think the last maybe 4 or 5 years, it was the automated testing, which I think was the big one. So I'm curious just on the hardware side of things, what kind of products should we expect there? I mean, there's lots of different, possibilities and systems, but I'm curious, like, what's the next big thing, first of all? Any thoughts on your end? Like,
the past year has definitely been automated testing for the last year or two. I think that's probably been the biggest trend. Actually, question for you first. Do you use a lot of automated testers? Is there any that you're currently employing?
I love it. Yeah. For me, it was a game changer. I'm all Trident, system Trident. I don't discriminate. Like I have friends who've got the Alcatronics and everything else, and I'm sure there's some very positive things that they've said about them, especially when it comes to costs and how many times per day you can do. But I think that for me it revolutionized, it significantly changed my reef keeping to the point where when I was in Costa Rica, I was able to see everything on my app, and I'm getting really low on phosphate, so I've asked my family to just add extra cubes of frozen brine shrimp and whatnot, which 3 years ago was impossible, or even a year ago was pretty much impossible. So that was a big change.
No, definitely. If you were to set up a new system, would you buy another automated tester for it? Like, how committed are you to them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. I was kind of holding out on the a regional Trident, just because first I got used to measuring everything manually, but when I took the plunge, maybe 2 years into it being on the market, I was kind of kicking myself for not having done that sooner. And same goes with the nitrate and phosphate. I think you pretty much got the trifecta, or like all five, the most important elements, in addition to temperature and salinity, and I guess pH to a certain degree.
Hmm.
So it has been a game changer for me. And I'm not running it on this tiny cube behind me, because it's kind of silly. But for anything that's a decent aquarium, like 40 gallons and plus, I think it's money well spent.
Yeah, well, that's fair. So okay, so we got automated testing. That's probably been, I'm gonna say, one of the bigger things of the past year or two, for
Hmm.
sure. At least for me, I think that's been the biggest trend. Before that, I'm gonna say it's probably filter rollers
Yeah.
and going through it and that kind of stripping out the water. I still love my filter rollers. I use them on my tanks, but at the same time, I do often wonder if we're stripping out too much. Like, is our water too clean now? That's something I think about a lot.
I never used a filter roller in my entire
Yeah.
life. So,
Really? Okay.
yeah.
One tank I have
I,
it on and one tank I don't. So I'm like 50-50 comparing for
nice.
a while. But
Nice.
if you,
What do you think was before filter rollers? What was the like the product of the year or whatever before that, other than LEDs?
those have been a big trend for a while.
Probably.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Those are the most recent ones that come to mind. Even on
Well,
the LED front, I guess that's another question. Do you think there's going to be anything? What's going to be next? Can LEDs get better? Is there going to be something instead of LEDs?
sure. One thing I remembered is Starfire aquariums. I think that
Hmm.
was also the thing that basically was like, for a few years, that was the biggest thing. So,
Yeah.
um, but to answer your question, I think, and I have no inside knowledge into any of this, but I think that everything is kind of going more towards the kind of panel looks in many ways. Like, I mean, we've kind of gone away from the puck, and I run blades on this tank, and I have 6 blades on my big monster aquarium, and I absolutely love them. I mean,
Nice.
there's a few things I love to see, maybe a little bit more LED types and
Hmm.
things like that, but. I think this is kind of where it's eventually going to go, most likely.
Nice. You have, yeah, the panel LEDs and the big blanket. I think is definitely the biggest thing.
Mm,
I guess probably the last year it started going that way, and a lot of new lights are starting to go that direction. You have
for
radions
sure.
and blades, right? Do you prefer one over the other?
I have them on my farm. I love my Radians a lot, and
Hmm.
I run both G5s just because I always like that spectrum, but I also experimented with the G6s, both blue and regular. I
Hmm.
love them all. And there's just something about, having owned every single generation after second generation of Radiants. I'm just very partial to them. I think it's another type of a gold standard there. If your coral is not doing well, it's most likely something else. Like, I mean, if it's not the light, you cannot blame the light, period.
Hmm.
um, but I mean, intensity and spectrum and time, all of those things, but like the light itself is phenomenal.
Yep.
And yeah, I do that, and I combined it with a couple of blades as well for a little bit more of the actinic look,
Nice.
just because I could.
Yep.
So,
Nice.
what about
Okay.
you?
Um, I tend to go towards the radions. I love a
Yeah.
blade of how thin it is and the fact that there's no fan and it's absolutely silent, which that's a very strong appeal for me. Overall,
Yeah.
I still feel the radions have a little bit better color rendition with them, so I tend to lean towards them. But I think they're both cool options out of the two. In the chat, Jeffrey, I want to see a merge of a filter roller and an algae scrubber, basically an auto cleaning scrubber. I feel like I've seen something there. I've seen one. I think it was Smart Reefs, maybe, but they did
Mm-hmm.
a filter roller and a skimmer all in one, essentially. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've actually seen someone. I feel like there was somewhere I saw that. I can't remember who makes it, but I feel like there was a scrubber, turf scrubber type of dealio.
I think so as well. And I've come across quite a few threads, and actually, there's a lot of builders that kind of do that. But I can't really imagine that going mainstream, like something that everybody's going to be using, because it's
Mm.
just one extra layer of complexity and managing it and whatnot. So I don't foresee that per se. If
Yep.
but okay, let's speculate a little bit. Like, what do you if we have a 5-year time horizon?
Yep.
What would be the actual hardware things that you think either might be available or
Hmm.
we wish they would be available?
There's definitely been things. I don't know if that's going to go anywhere, but it's about like ceramic LEDs and different lights like that. I don't know if that's going
Hmm.
anywhere or if there's any big thing on that front. One thing, Kessel kind of has one, but one thing that was kind of cool, some of the ones where they kind of focus the lens, but you can mount them crazy high. I
Hmm.
don't think this would be a common
Yes.
thing, but in my head, I think it'd be cool to have your lights basically like pot lights on the roof that could light up a reef tank and have like no lights above a tank, completely open top. I think that'd be pretty cool
Yeah.
to do. Again, who knows if someone will do that. Kessel loosely has something that does it, kind of, sort of, but not. As for automation, I feel like trace elements is kind of like up there in, the trendiness of things, and ICP test, monitoring it, which absolutely can work, right? Like there's definitely merit to it.
Yes.
But I feel like that, and if we take a look at where the trace elements are, and there's also the microbiome side, but it's probably going to be the next level of tank
Hmm.
control and parameters and maintenance beyond, the big five that we look at now, right? Which is your calcium, milk, mag, and your nutrients. So I,
Correct.
I kind of think something along that. Like there's probably more important parameters in the trace elements that have more of an effect that we'll learn more about. And I think that's probably going to be right. Like which, if you're deficient in this, certain corals suffer, or I don't know. That's kind of my gut on the next thing. What do you think?
Well, yeah, if we go backwards on what are the major pain points that reefers still have, right? I would say, obviously water change is a big one, and while I'm using Versa on multiple aquariums, and it's great.
Mm-hmm.
I always still think that it's maybe it could be improved, right? I mean,
Yep.
maybe it should be um, faster water changes or more accurate. I think the accuracy is still like I find it drifts and there is some calibration that's required and all of that stuff. So
Yep.
I think there is definitely something there. But I would also think that the main focus is going to be on more newer users, newer
Mm-hmm.
reefers that come in. Like, I mean, this tank behind me is a very good example. This is the Hello Reef, and
Yep.
I think it's designed for somebody who just doesn't know anything and just kind of getting into the hobby, and they don't want to do all the research and read up on things and just kind of start with like something that actually works out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a little bit more of that. I think Red Sea is kind of going more down this path of having this ecosystem. Probably, if I were to guess, we would end up with almost like an Apple and Android environment where there's going to be a couple of not closed systems, but maybe like
Ecosystems.
ecosystems, right? And we kind of almost seeing that with Apex,
Mm-hmm.
like Neptune and Ecotech and AI, which is technically it's one brand now,
Yep.
where you've got all of those devices talking to each other. So probably the talking to each other
Mm-hmm.
part and being as um, uh, easy to maybe control or troubleshoot things.
Yep.
This is definitely where I would see things. It was within the next five
Yeah.
years.
I do 100% think that a lot of new tanks will be smaller tanks. Obviously, there'll still be, the niche of big
Yeah.
giant reef tanks, but I think the average person is going to be more, that nano to mid size. Because again, it is expensive, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
it's shipping's more expensive, getting coral and livestock's more expensive. It's a lot more affordable to have, a 40 gallon than to just have a 200 gallon. So I definitely think the trend's going to be more like the nano to mid size.
Hmm.
One So, where is Ash's comment? It said somewhere about like AI and tank controlled. That very well could be right if you have
Yeah.
more intelligent controllers that can manage stuff based on parameters. Something that I've thought about making for a while that'd be kind of cool is having AI backend to do like coral ID. So you just take a picture and tell you what coral it is. I think that'd be kind of cool and wouldn't be too hard to do. I mean, it'd take a lot of AI training, but that'd be a super useful app for reefers. Be like, here it is, and there's like apps that will tell you like, oh, this plant needs water or whatever, right?
Yeah.
What's wrong with it?
Yeah.
Like if you had a way to help you troubleshoot, unhappy coral, pests or do
Mm-hmm.
stuff, that'd be cool too. So I think there's definitely some cool stuff that could be done with the AI space to do predictions based on identifications and whatnot.
I agree, and I thought a lot about it. I mean, as you know, I run aquatic log, and
Yep.
one of the things I've done there is I have like a very large database of a
Corals.
picture,
Yeah.
and it's labeled by one of the
Oh.
users of what it is. So this
Mhm.
is something that I've been kind of playing with this myself as well.
Beautiful.
The issue a lot of times is that stupid blue color, because a lot of folks they upload things, and because it's just sometimes so blue, it's just throws things off. It's a
Yep.
lot easier with the plants where
It's white
this
light,
thing
not.
looks decent in any light.
Mhm.
Um, funny quip. I can keep a coral, but I cannot keep a plant alive. I just always mess up, and I forget to water it and everything else. So yes,
Mhm.
check this out. I really like this.
Let it be.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
That's cute.
yeah, I know.
But yeah,
But I
having
digress.
having the overly blue photos is definitely an issue. But I do think if
Hmm.
you did do, custom LLM or just train one rather to ID stuff based off the big data set, it would be really cool to be able to. There's so many posts and so many things I always see. What coral is this? What coral is this? Like that'd be a really cool thing to add into the app. Now the back end for that and what it actually costs to run it's a whole nother thing. But the feature
Yeah.
wise, it'd be cool.
Yeah, and I think again the reef to reef is the one that's sitting on probably the most advanced identification thing right there.
Mm-hmm.
So they, if one were to take the photo and then the thread and extract that information and just kind of train on it,
Yep.
that could be a huge thing in of itself.
No,
Couldn't agree more.
definitely.
Uh,
So John, all we're talking about is equipment but for many, the cost of reefing is getting so many out of the hobby. That's kind of why I think a lot of people are going to start going to smaller tanks, right? Because they're a lot more affordable, and you don't have to go out and buy the newest, latest, and greatest. I mean, you could always pick up used tanks with everything you need relatively cheap, and that's definitely the more budget side. But I do think that it is going to be trending into smaller, desktop style systems. Easier to maintain. It's way cheaper. All your livestock's
yep.
cheaper. Your pinky frag looks big in the tank, not just like a little speck in a big tank, right? So there's definitely a lot of advantages to that side of it.
I couldn't agree more. I'm actually enjoying the tank behind me because you get up close and you can get little things here and there. And you are 100% correct. Like it's just become so prohibitively expensive
Mm.
that you've got like almost that stratification going on. Like, I mean, there are people that get those $300 torches or, home wreckers and all of that stuff. But most folks cannot even come close to that, right? So
Mm.
it's a problem unless you trade up and you kind of
That's all
have
I do
some.
now. Like I'm so cheap with some of the corals now. I'm like, someone has something for sale. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to
Yeah,
pay that. I'm like, what do you want? I'll frag you something. Let's just trade. But again, that doesn't help you when you're new. But once you have a coral collection, it's a lot easier long term.
yeah. One just kind of coming back to automation. One thing that was the downside of it, though, is that you rely so much on it that you are sometimes can be out of tune with your aquarium. I
Yep.
find that back in the day, when you would spend your Saturday testing every single parameter and looking at it and whatnot, you just are more reactive, and when
Mm-hmm.
something is there, you just kind of notice it a lot easier. And
Yep.
I'm now a lot more hands off my reef from that perspective.
So on the cheap versus expensive front as well, another consideration is too is low tech versus high tech,
Yeah.
and you can absolutely have a budget tank with like next to no gear, or you could have a decked out and have all the automation in the world.
Hmm.
Obviously that's a very different budget realm of each and different levels of the hobby. But yeah, you can rely on automation and auto testers, and you will be less in tune with your tank, right? Because you just look at a screen and you're like, oh, it's all good. Versus staring at it, like, I don't know, that coral looks a little different today. What's up with it? Um, so there is, different mentalities to reefing and, what suits, the individual person's lifestyle.
Yeah, I would agree that, and every once in a while, I'm like, okay, I'm going as simple as possible because now that the COVID thing and everything is
Mhm.
kind of in the rear view mirror, at least for now, thank God. On the other hand, we spend a lot more time at work or outside, and it's just not enough time to spend on the reef itself, right?
Yeah. Well, our hobby's also super seasonal, I find too, at least
Yes.
for, most of us. Like if I look at the YouTube stats, they definitely go down in the summer and then fall comes and winter and, it's way up again, right? So definitely people are more into the tanks. When it's cold out, you're inside the house, you're staring at them more. In summertime, you're out doing other stuff and they are definitely more neglected for sure.
I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah. So Jeff's comments, Sanos can be more of a challenge for a beginner though as well. They can, but I also find if people just stick to like, a weekly 1 bucket water change,
Mm-hmm.
it prevents so many issues and it will just make that path to success extremely easy. Like if you're 14 gallon Hello Reef, if you did a 5 gallon bucket a week water change, there's a 33%. Even if something was out of whack, it would probably be corrected and you may never run into a big issue with that. If a beginner does that. And then if you look at the cost of a bucket of salt, right? You can do
Yep.
what 180 gallons with 5 that lasts you ages on a nano. So it can make it easy and affordable if you're diligent with that little bit of maintenance. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
why I know some reefers that have had kept 100 200 gallon aquariums, and then at some point when they either not necessarily get out of the hobby, but they just burn out or they have to move or something like that.
Mhm.
If once you've done that for a few years, getting like a 30-gallon tank and just kind of putting only like really nice stuff in there, and then all you do is just large water changes and a little bit of supplementation,
Yep.
you have the most pristine water parameters and experience in of itself.
No, for sure. So I mean, on an nano, water changes are cheap. Yes, salt is overly priced. It keeps going up in price, which sucks. I mean, that's like the worst part.
Yeah.
However, on a small tank, it's probably not that big of a deal. Your water change is pretty dang cheap in the grand scheme of things. Or if you have big tanks that you maintain, that in a nano, like Snoop Dogg was saying, oh, I just use water for my big tanks. I mean, that is one method too, right? So you put, your fresh water in the big tank and that water goes to another tank and it could like trickle down the chain, especially if it
Yeah.
goes into a nano, you're not dosing, if your parameters are good in your main tank, it's an easy way to kind of flow stuff through it.
Yeah. I just thought of something else, and that is less product wise, but I think the
Mm-hmm.
biggest change I think that will eventually come, and I don't know if it's going to be 5 years from now, 1 year from now, or 10 years from now, is our understanding of really what's happening inside of the tank. Because
Mm-hmm.
while we've advanced the hobby a lot in the last even 10 years, I think we're nowhere near really understanding what really is happening on the level that we cannot test for or see. And there's microbiome and all that stuff, but you just gave me a thought. So I do the same thing. I have the main tank. The water in there automatically goes into my farm. So the
Mm-hmm.
farm now gets kind of the second tier water, and then all of that water goes through couple of very small tanks. We're talking 10 to 20 gallons. And they just get extra large water changes through them. And in theory, the water is still excellent because all the corals thrive in it, and basically you have large turnover. But I've had crazy issues in some of those tanks, and I like the same coral would do well in one aquarium and not in the other, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not clear what could be causing it.
Yeah.
We still don't know.
It's true. The microbiome thing is interesting too, though. It's still very
Yeah,
young, but
yeah,
it will be interesting to see in the next, 4 or 5 years where that comes. The bigger that data set gets and the more correlations come out of it, the more useful it's going to be. I have one. I've done it once, like at least a year ago now, maybe two. So I'm
hmm
curious. I do have another kit. I just haven't done it. But one of these days I'm going to send it in. It'll be interesting to compare it and see how things have changed over time.
But what was the like a takeaway for you once you, let's say you got your sheet with 33 bacteria, and these ones are good ones and these ones are bad ones.
That's the problem. I don't know what the takeaway was but I think seeing the difference over time, is
Mm-hmm.
it better or worse, or how did things change? I think will add more value to it than just the one-time
Mm-hmm.
snapshot. So that's
Yeah.
always the tricky bit.
Yeah, I would agree. So
Yep.
that would be the big one.
Yeah.
Um, where do you think the hobby is gonna go? Just
It's
how's it
interesting
gonna
with
change?
like if you look at the coral and fish imports, stuff has been
Mm-hmm.
stopped, stuff has started again with different regions. In one of the other conversations recently, we was talking about, people are importing, stuff from mariculture, but mariculture have a certain chunk of stock, so the variety is
Mm-hmm.
not always as great with that
Mm-hmm.
after a certain extent. So it'll be interesting to see how that works for getting new corals and diversity into the hobby
Mm-hmm.
from that perspective, just from I guess the wild slash mariculture imports. The other interesting part will be, where things go with spawning, and is there possibility to hybridize corals, either to a
Yes.
make them stronger, more resilient, or b for the hobbyists, can you make them more colorful? Can you start mixing different strains and get some weird, crazy new things out? I think that would be a cool kind of feature thing of it. Especially if
Yeah.
there's like those splice acros and different ones, right? It's like how can we hybridize and make cooler corals, especially if there's less and less wild, right? How
I
can we
agree.
get cooler stuff? So I think that's probably, as we learn more about captive breeding and spawning,
Mm-hmm.
finding ways to do that, I think will be kind of like a future kind of cool trend of the hobby.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. Again, that's more or less for mainstream, and this is more for I guess the propagators, and
Mm-hmm.
so the main stream person still benefits from that. But it's for the those people that actually go hardcore with the coral in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I think too with like a question for you. With you use automated testers. Do you do automated dosing?
No, I've never done that, and I don't really want to experiment because I just I want to keep the human element in it.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit too scared that, for example, for whatever reason, and it doesn't happen very often. Like maybe once a year, my alkalinity would read like kind of strange number.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because the cord got pinched or something like that. And as a human, I'm gonna go like, okay, maybe let's not go over the top here and like retest it, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But as a machine, and I guess you can automate that as well. You can have thresholds and maybe double check things and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a little bit further down the line. So, but
Yeah.
I can definitely see that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's fair. I honestly, when I originally had my Alcatronic and certain ones, it was like 2 years before I finally said, okay, fine, I'll let it do some tweaking for me. Not 100%, but within a range, I'll
Yeah.
let it tweak stuff.
And how did it go?
It was fine. Never had an issue. But again, a lot of times, like I'll use a calcium reactor and then I'll do dosing on top of it. So the bulk is still, done on its manual approach. And then the tweaking on top of it, I'll let it do mini tweaks based off of that.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, I think we're still like I've read a fair bit of information about the time of day when you're supposed to dose certain things, and also how those things like how calcium interacts with alkalinity and the magnesium, and all those. If one is high, the other one is high, then the third one can be high, like all those ratios and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point exactly, there's so many variables that unless somebody has that oversight into the whole system, like your lighting is also connected to the doser and whatnot, that's really when you start making
Mm-hmm.
it a lot more efficient
Yep.
from that
No, that's true.
perspective.
Yeah, it's
But
interesting. Even some of the comments
yeah,
too about people using auto testers, but still dose based off, the results manually.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, exactly.
They're
I think the big one is going to be the more people we get in the hobby, and the more money can kind of go into R&D, that the more we'll benefit. So that's hopefully
Yep,
going to happen.
I think so. But yeah, there's no shortage. Sorry, just trying to catch up on the comments.
Yeah. Hey,
Aqua
everyone.
balls. Need more people to reviews on saltwater aquarium products. I do my chance when I get new stuff. Do my part.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's there's definitely no shortage of products. And the thing is, most of them work, right? It's not like any, there's a bazillion lights and they're all going to grow coral. It's like which
Yeah.
ones are quieter and have fancy apps and more tunable. Like most, the sunshine will grow stuff. Most stuff will grow things. I don't even think that's an issue anymore. Like anything's going to grow. It's which features do you want out of it?
Yeah, but also if you remember when LEDs just came, like I don't know, 12, 13 years ago or
Yeah.
something like that, when there was a big push. I remember there were so many more articles about the PAR and experiments on that and the spectrum and whatnot. And then it kind of not necessarily died off, but it has not been, people were not spending as much time kind of geeking out on that. And I think it's a shame because,
How
yeah.
big of a deal do you think spectrum is? Do you
Well,
think,
okay. Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, I always see people comparing the spectrum graph versus this one. And at the end of the day, do you think it makes that big of a difference?
So I can tell you from my experience,
Mm-hmm.
this paper was never published, but I did write it for Ecotech. I want to say about 10 years ago, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I did the experiment where I had a 24 by 48 tank. So basically it's a kind of
Like,
Sipora 80-gallon aquarium,
mm-hmm.
which is great dimensions. And so I don't think we talked about this one, right? So this is actually a pretty cool story. So the tank that basically I've had mature for over a few months, so it
Mm-hmm.
was established. Then I had 3 radions on it. So each section, so I split it into 3 sections, and on each one of them there's a radion, and
Mm-hmm.
that radion, the light would not overlap with another radion because
Okay.
especially back in the day, I want to say it was like maybe radion 3 or maybe
Yeah.
4. The spread was a
More
lot
narrow.
narrower, so it
Mm-hmm.
was a lot easier to do that. Nowadays, it's a lot harder to do it on this small of a tank.
Your little
Then I
dividers.
had a crate,
Yep.
and I got probably about, I want to say 10 different yes, exactly, 10 different species of coral, primarily Acropora, but
Mm-hmm.
also a few others. And I got 6 of each frag. So basically
Mm-hmm.
from the different colonies. So I went to a few folks here in Toronto, and I used my own, and I basically had 6 identical frags. So 8 species,
Mm-hmm.
6 of each. So a fair bit of coral. I've positioned them identical. So it was 2 per light. So this is like a control
Yeah.
experiment to a certain degree. And I've put them up, 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. And then, so there's 8 different ones to observe. And I
Mm-hmm.
start taking photos, and I had the lights. One was full spectrum, so we're talking radian at 100%.
Mm-hmm.
One was AB plus, so
Mm-hmm.
you've got full blue, and then 20 or 25% on the other channels.
Yep.
And then the third one was all blue. And then I used the par meter to adjust so that, if you're, let's say, only blues are running at 50% total intensity, then it's only going to be like 25 or whatever
Yeah.
for the full spectrum. So whatever they are.
So all the par
And
was
then
matched.
the par was matched, and it was about 2 to 50 par. So roughly something
Mm-hmm.
like that. So here's the kicker. I've set this up. First, I actually had all the corals under the same light for another month or 2, just to make sure that they were all,
Mm-hmm.
growing and happy. After that, I go in and I switch the colors, and I have a buddy who's basically in the industry, like he's doing servicing, and he has an eye for coral for sure. And he came over the next day,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, "Oh my god, there's such a big difference between the corals. Like, I mean, this is clearly, see how better like full spectrum is than the non-full spectrum, or vice versa, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
was." And I'm like, "Dude, they haven't changed any pigments yet. It was yesterday that they were all on the same
Yeah.
light. It's the ignition, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
pigmentation, the reflection, that completely changes the look of the coral."
Yep.
So I've done that, and then I just ran it for I want to say 3 months, give or take.
Hmm.
And long story short, there was no difference.
Yeah. So you put them all back under the same light and they'll look the same.
They look exactly the same. Not only that, I was thinking that, one that has a red color, there will be more algae growing on this, as we've been told. There was
Hmm.
no difference in the algae. It was
Yep.
basically exactly the same. So
Hmm.
that I witnessed with my own eyes.
So so if you put them all under back under the same spectrum, they basically look the same. Was there
Yeah.
any noticeable difference in growth amount versus, blue versus full or anything? So colors are the same.
That I did not
Yeah.
see. I didn't weigh the corals, but only in like 2-3 months,
Hmm.
whatever I was running, it's a lot harder to see any real difference. So I did
Yep.
not see any difference whatsoever
Hmm.
from that perspective. Now I do think that the what is it, DLI, or
Yep.
time under light, or whatever it
DLI,
is.
daylight
Yeah,
integral.
yeah, that is probably a lot more important in and figuring out the sweet spot for that. I think this is definitely something that's going to be pretty cool.
Hmm.
Just because I was reading an article in one of the latest coral magazines, and there's this gentleman who is also making his own scrubbers, light scrubbers. I don't
Hmm.
remember his name, but anyways, he like is a true experimenter. Like, he tried a whole bunch of different things where he was doing different light schedules, and then he was weighing the algae
Hmm.
to know what the light spectrum, how it translates to the algae growth and consumption. And he kind of came up with this weird schedule where instead of like doing 8 hours, or like to say 10 hours and then off, he is doing some sort of a, if I recall correctly, maybe like 6 hours on, and then it's off, and then it's on for like an hour, and then it's off for 2 hours, and then it's on for an hour. So there's like 5 light periods throughout 24 hours, one big one and a couple of smaller ones. And he basically said that it doubled
Hmm.
the production of the algae.
That's a crazy schedule.
It is a crazy
Hmm.
schedule. So if you look at not the last Coral magazine, I think the one before, like that, you can actually see that. So what I did, I right now run Refugium on my main tank, just because I've got tons of stuff going on there, and I'm trying to bring down the phosphates in this thing, and that is this thing's got to stop doing it. And I basically just took that exact schedule and I programmed it, and my Refugium right now runs on that crazy schedule. And
Have you
I
noticed a
think
difference?
I think so. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
my pH is sorry, my phosphates are going down faster. I
Nice.
anecdotal, but I figured that he spent like 2 years doing all of this, and it's documented. So why not try
Hmm.
it? Like, I don't
Yep.
see anything. That,
Yep. Makes sense.
yeah,
A couple of people in the comments are questioning if 3 months is long enough for that experiment, but I mean, it's still
agreed.
longer is obviously better, but it's still
Yeah,
pretty cool to see that. And I do kind of agree. A lot of the spectrum is what's reflected back at you. So the
yeah,
wider the spectrum, the more colors you can theoretically see. So I am always hesitant, or not hesitant, but I lean more towards the full spectrum side of things because I like to
yeah.
see more pretty colors.
Yeah, and to those fine folks, I would say it's actually a lot harder to keep such an aquarium than it sounds, because you have only that many frags. You like, eventually they're all going to be covered with algae, or something is going to die, and everything else. So I wish I would run it a little bit longer, for sure. But going back to like Reef Central days, so the I'm gonna do the other side of the argument.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, like, I was always fascinated by sunlit aquariums.
Yep.
It's just I love that look,
Mm-hmm.
and we still nowhere near in our daylight fixtures to even get anywhere close to what you're gonna observe when it comes to snorkeling under the sunlight. Like, it's just different rendition.
Yeah.
But the point of the story is, I think it was a tank in like Portugal or someplace warm, and the guy had like a massive aquarium, maybe 200 gallons under. It kind of was on an open, semi-open room with
Hmm.
basically nothing above it, so it was lit, by the sun. And he believed that the corals were losing color and becoming more brown under that. And when he wanted to color them up, he would move them like to into the place where he had the LEDs, and then they would color up.
I wonder,
I don't know. Yeah,
or is that they just look brown because all corals look brown in sunlight? Like if you just
but
added, how would it look at nighttime with the blue
no,
added in?
he said that they were actually like the LED was bringing out the pigmentation. However,
Mm,
it's a little bit of a different thing as well, because just because you don't see a blue light, that doesn't mean that you don't have it. So
mm,
when radion, even if it looks like under daylight, this is
mm.
actually a little bit different because you actually have a very strong blue channel. You just don't see it with your eyes. So
Yeah, true.
yeah,
Very, very true. And white light is basically like a blue diode with a phosphorus coating on it. So
and there is
food for
all of
thought.
that stuff as well. So yeah,
And
yeah,
white's
exactly.
technically all the colors in a sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. Do. Yeah, so Geek Moto. I set my Mobius apps to the Phoenix 14 and have never touched it. I also have T5s. Yeah, not messing with your tank has massive merits to if you're constantly
Agreed.
messing with schedules and different things. It's good for experimenting, when you have multiple tanks, but if it's your only tank, set it and forget it. It's kind of a good way to go because your corals will adapt and they usually get annoyed if
Yeah.
you're constantly messing with things.
Yeah, I think I finally nailed what I consider for myself a perfect schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Just because for those folks that maybe are new to this space, I've been featured in Aqua Elimination Signature Series, and I do have my own YouTube channel, Treasure Corals, and all of that
Also
stuff
linked in the
where I
comments.
document.
Yep.
Yes, I document all of this, but I always like once in a while I do share my light schedule and I talk about any changes in there. And lately I've been running a combination of the AI blade grows and glows
Mm-hmm.
together. So I finally, I think, got like the perfect light schedule where I have everything. I have a period of like a little bit of warm, like it ramp up. So there's a little bit of that. So you have period of not a lot of sun, so to speak. I have a perfect amount of the 10K kind of look where it still looks aesthetically great, but not too washed out, and I can enjoy the fish a lot more and kind of enjoy the corals that have the blue color, for example, that otherwise just gets washed out. And then I have a very nice kind of in between mode, and then I have like a blue mode.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think it's in the perfect ratio for me, and it's also time to throughout the day where if I'm sitting and I'm enjoying it during dinner time, like there's a certain element of aesthetics that I want, and right now it's just picture perfect. So I'll be doing
Nice.
a video shortly on that.
So I'm asking because I just looked up your profile. So that one was with the Hydra 64s, and you're currently using
Yes.
blades. Are you using the same
Yes.
schedule from the Hydras on the blades, or is it or similar?
It used to be fairly similar, but I find that I tweak it every 2-3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily because I get bored of it, but I think I understand lighting a little bit better, and I understand what kind of stuff that I enjoy. And
Mm.
um, for a while, I was thinking, just set and forget like one color and maybe a little bit of a ramp up, with the blues.
Mm.
But lately, I'm a lot more of I want to have my daylight in certain area, and then I want a different other ways to enjoy the tank, because
Yep.
it's almost like the same as with Peninsula. With the Peninsula tank, you get 3 different tanks, so it's
Mm-hmm.
the same idea with the time. You
Yep.
actually get 3 different aquariums if you look
Mm.
at them under blue light, under kind of medium light, and the wider light.
Yep.
There's different things that you can experiment with.
Yeah, my schedule is similar. It starts off AB plus-ish in the morning, and then by
Hmm.
noon, it's basically AB plus, but ramped up the all the whites and the colors, basically
Hmm.
more of a full spectrum, whiter, crispy, white looking tank for
Yeah,
about
yeah,
four
exactly.
hours, which is also my higher par period of the day,
Hmm.
which I feel like
Yeah,
brings out better colors in the coral. Then it kind of ramps down over a couple hours back to more
yes,
AB plus ish, and then bluer in the evening. So it sounds
yeah,
similar, right? So that kind of full spectrum,
I
depending on the
agree.
time of day.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm doing something very similar.
Perfect. Aqua balls. I just got a Hydros Wave engine with two 4K jars. I'm scared to install it. I don't know what's going to happen. It's the only way to find out. Pop that baby on the tank. More flow, more better.
What? Oh, yeah. What
Yeah,
bad can happen? So.
yeah, more flow. Just don't blast the skin off your corals and they'll be happy. I switch to blues when it's TV time. You know what's funny? I have a projector in my living room and I actually have like a
Hmm.
movie mode, which dims my aquarium way down just to reduce any spill light for the projector. So yeah.
Yeah. Mine is in the kitchen,
Mm,
and every time I'm, let's say, have a meeting in the kitchen, like if I'm working from home that day, and I'm on a camera, my face just looks blue,
yeah,
and like it's like
the blue man group.
Avatar. And even when the tank, as a matter of fact, is not blue, so it can be 10K to the eye,
Mm-hmm.
but again, it's one of those things where there's just really so much blue, and the camera picks it up
Yeah.
that I've got this blue tinge.
Okay, you gotta get yourself a big orange filter for your thing to cut it out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah, cameras are not fond of blue lights. If you guys are taking pictures and they're drastically blue, find anything either orange or yellow and put it in front of the lens, and it makes a pretty big difference.
yes.
Yep. Okay, so other kind of, I guess, future stuff of reef keeping. So, I mean, I love seeing experiments like that. I love that you did the different spectrum thing.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick for Reef Wholesale, he did a really good one around DLI. Same thing, where it
Mm-hmm.
was basically more intense par for a shorter time versus lower par for a longer time. And at the end
Yes.
of the day, they both got the same amount of light energy. And a lot of the corals are
Mm-hmm.
what they're more or less the same. Certain corals had different growth patterns based off of it. Like a Monty Cap, for instance, would be a tighter spiral, more cone shape in high light, where it
Yes. Yes.
played out more in low light. So I think the growth patterns were the biggest difference I saw in that. But aside from that, a lot of the corals had similar, health and whatnot. But
I remember visiting Patrick, and he showed me all of this. And again, it's I think we need a lot more control experiments when it comes to that. I think
mhm,
kind of the gold standard there to a certain degree was BRS when they were doing some of those things. But again, it kind of going back to, it's really hard to do a control experiment with those things because they just have a tendency to die on you, or it can be a pest, or it can be
mhm.
so many other things that you just have not accounted for.
Yep,
So it's a problem.
that's a
Or
fair
a
one. Yep.
microbiome. That's another thing, right? I mean, you may think that it's because of the DLI and everything else, but I'm just spitballing here. But it could be also the fact that maybe under one of those tanks with lower DLI, sorry, not lower DLI, with shorter intensity, for example,
Hmm.
there's different type of bacteria or algae or other microorganisms that are doing it. So it's really not the coral that is
Yep.
reacting to it, but it's something else, and that's how the coral reacts to that and not the light.
Yep. Well, another interesting thing is too, is the same body of water could also have different parameters. Like I know, not parameters, but different microbiomes. Like
Yeah.
a while back, I remember I had on Abe from Coral Euphoria, and his
Mm-hmm.
systems are all plumbed together, a ton of tanks.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
he'll have, some stuff that's happy and thrives in one tank and not in another tank. It's the
Yeah.
same body of water, it's the same parameters, but there's, different little microbiomes within each system, which is interesting.
Yeah,
So,
I have the same with my farm. There's actually three different aquariums that are connected together. And at some point, there were four,
mhm.
and I did not believe it. But I do have a friend here that kind of told me that same story, and
Mm.
that's exactly what I've experienced. It's just a little bit different
Yep.
because in each one of them, there may be certain algae, for example, that just proliferates, and now it's kind of doing its own thing, and it doesn't exist in the other one because you've scrubbed it a little bit more vigorously, and
Yep.
it's just something that goes
Got rid
on.
of his hold. Yep.
Yeah,
Geek Moto. So you're asking to explain what DLI is. So DLI is
yeah.
essentially par over duration. So it's saying you're if you have 500 par for 1 hour, your DLI is whatever X, and if you have 100 par for 5 hours, it'll have the same DLI. So it's basically the intensity over duration. So you can run your lights longer at a lower percentage or higher at a shorter percentage and still give it the same amount of light and energy. That's kind of the simplest way to explain it.
Very eloquently put. So, and at the same time, there's a ceiling on both sides of it because
Mhm.
otherwise, you don't want to do 1,000 par in half an hour. Well, technically, it would be the same DLI, but you're going to kill your coral.
Yeah, so within reasonable limits. But
Yeah.
if you want to, say you have an 8 hour light schedule and you want a 10 hour one, you could lower your intensity a little bit. And the theory is,
Yep.
most things aren't going to care and they'll be just fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that gives you kind of a range to play with your tank. And in theory, if everyone did calculate DLI, it could be an interesting way to kind of compare a coral. You buy a coral from someone, it's happy in this DLI range. Doesn't really matter
Mm-hmm.
what their intensity are. You could figure out your DLI range for that same spot and be like, oh, this would be happy. This is exactly what it's used to. But not a lot of people
Agreed.
necessarily do it. It's used a lot more in like farming and vegetables and that type of stuff, not as much in reef keeping, but it's
Mm-hmm.
a interesting parameter for comparison.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
that's exactly right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so some parameters actually do calculate DLI for you, for sure. Du-du-dun. What else do you think would be potential, or actually another fun question is, what do you think the hobby is lacking? What do you think would be like a cool new next level up for the hobby?
I think knowledge,
Yeah.
to me, is the biggest thing. Is um, what this hobby has is
Mm-hmm.
anecdotes. Everything is an anecdote.
Yeah.
My neighbor has or my friend has an amazing aquarium. I'm gonna come over there and he tells me, "Oh, I use coral snow, or I do this, or I shake my stir up my sand there." And then like people run around and they try to do this, and it worked for me. I'm gonna tell it to somebody else, and somebody else is gonna do it. I think this is probably because the amount of variables is so incredibly high compared
Mm-hmm.
to any freshwater system out there. Like freshwater system, you can almost most of them you can systematize to like almost like a process that you can follow, and you get these results pretty much like a cookbook. With
Mm-hmm.
a saltwater aquarium, it's a lot harder because there's just so many variables and
Mm-hmm.
things that will completely deviate and give you different results. And I think our knowledge is nowhere near where we want to empower, especially new folks that come into the hobby. And that is really what it's lacking. And this is what it needs, I think, badly.
So we do have a lot of anecdotal,
Yeah.
and we have a lot of technology to make it easier in theory,
Yes. Yes.
but it also complicates it more because there's a lot more things that one could do to a reef tank. Do you
Hmm.
think, looking back 10 years from now and, basically everyone just water changes versus now the bazillion different things, do you think it's easier or harder for a new person coming in now?
I That's a very good question. Sometimes I think it's actually harder
Mm-hmm.
in many ways. Um, on one hand, you've got so much more knowledge at your fingertips, especially when you go to YouTube. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the stuff that was say World Like Corals produces, like where you go and you visit somebody's aquarium. I wish I had that information before, but it's also a double-edged sword, right? Because it can be a little bit discouraging for folks because let's not forget that person may either have a lot of money and killed a lot of stuff, or they've been working on it for 20 years to
Mm-hmm.
get to that level, and no amount of little know-hows here and there are going to be able to kind of reproduce this.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for whatever reason, it was a little bit easier before. Some of the tanks that I look, so I've been documenting my aquariums for over 10 years, ever since I started. And some of the aquariums that I had, I look back and I'm like, oh my god, like how was I able to do that? And I don't have a good answer, so
Hmm.
not
That's
sure.
fair. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it can be easier now, but I think it could be more overwhelming now
yeah.
because there's so much knowledge.
I
But the knowledge can make it
I
easier,
would,
but there's
yeah,
more options
I
and
would
rabbit holes.
say, I would say the biggest factor, and I've interviewed a lot of reefers, and so did you. Um, I think the biggest factor in all of this is the amount of attention that one could give to a reef aquarium. This
Hmm.
is probably the most important factor out there, because some of the best reefers I know are people that, let's say, have retired.
Yep.
You live in your apartment. Let's say you have tons of free time and you want to dedicate it onto this. You're not
Hmm.
necessarily going out there running around or riding a bike. This is your hobby, and you want to spend 8 hours or 4 hours a day working on an aquarium, and
Yep.
you love it. That is really, a recipe for success.
No, 100%. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's experience with it to a certain extent, right? The longer you're in it, the more you just pick up and know things versus,
Yeah.
blindly freaking out. The amount of posts I see when someone's like, they see a pot in their tank and like, what is this? Oh my gosh, something's new. And, that definitely happens when you're a brand new reef keeper and things just start appearing in your systems.
Yeah, I was
Yep.
when I was in Costa Rica. So I felt with my foot something that I stepped on among the sand. So I picked it up, and it was some sort of a dead um sea. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank. What did Jake Adams hate in the aquariums?
Many things.
The foam? No, not the foam.
Oh,
I'm
sponges.
just drawing sponges. Yes,
Yeah.
it was a dead sponge, and it had some strange copepods on this thing that I've never seen in my entire life, like long and black and whatnot. And I'm wondering, like, I mean, I've never seen them in the hobby. Like, we all have kind of the same few types of copepods. Where
Yep.
are all these guys are coming from? And I was like tempted to bring some with me. I didn't, but
Hmm.
they looked really, really
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, okay. So another thing that's popped into my head is talking about the hobby and where things are going. And
Mm-hmm.
on the pest side, I feel like a lot of pests are easier to beat now. A lot of algae are easier to beat now. But I'm also hearing people of like the new acro-eating flatworms and like
Oh
different
yeah.
species that are harder to deal with. Like I haven't had to deal with the new ones yet, but
Yep.
that might be another thing in the hobby, right? Is there stuff that's coming out or somehow making its way to farms that's more resilient or harder to beat? Would that be an issue? Or if there's less importing, you were buying all hobby girl and aquaculture based, maybe pests will be less and less of an issue over time. But
Yeah, I think eventually, and we're nowhere near this, but the company called Tropica
mm-hmm.
for freshwater. So
Oh, the tissue
when you
cultured,
get, yeah, you
yeah,
get those little balls,
or
right?
cups.
Sorry, like caps,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got a clear lid, and basically you buy it and you put it, and it's as good of a plant as you can possibly get. It's
Mm-hmm.
pristine. There is no bad organism on this thing. You're not going to introduce anything there.
Yeah.
I think where we have a bit of a niche is there's nobody really that can kind of offer that level of standard when it comes to coral, right?
Mm-hmm.
For many reasons, and it's also a double-edged sword as well, because on the other hand, if I have an aquarium and it's 90% full of corals that I bought at local, trade swaps and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
probably I'm not gonna go and buy this pristine coral because I'm already rolling the dice with whatever I have, kind of thing.
Yep.
But that would be very neat if we could have that level of
Tissue cultured
standard.
coral,
Yeah, yeah,
guaranteed pest free. I mean, I would buy
yeah.
it if it was like reasonably priced and not excessively expensive. Like, I think that'd be great if you didn't have to worry about dipping and pests and make life a lot
Yes,
easier.
yes, yes.
Huh.
Because it's probably the hardest thing to have pest free something over long term. But
Mm-hmm.
if anything, that could be a big one. Maybe this
Oh,
is the next thing for me to work on.
I agree. I think it'd be
Yeah,
huge if you didn't have to worry necessarily about pests and dipping, because
yeah,
dipping it can stress out
yeah.
corals, right? Like
Yes,
I've killed
for sure.
corals in the past from dipping them,
Yes,
especially after they've
yes.
been in the mail for a couple of days. So
Yep. Yeah. No, I agree.
it's definitely a stressor. So avoiding that stress would just up success overall. So
Yes.
solid, solid. Off topic. Will you guys be going to Reefapalooza in New York next year? No idea, but maybe next year I'm gonna start trying to go to shows again. The last year or two was a bit of a write off.
I I like the idea, so let's make sure that we hook up and we'll have a nice dinner somewhere.
Sounds
So
good. Sounds like fun. Don't know about New York, but I'll go to at least probably one or two shows next year. We'll figure out which ones once it's closer. But
you bet.
I still like rap, the Florida one. That one's always fun.
Yeah. So I'm definitely looking forward to that one. I got a question for you. So
Yes.
we talked about like industry in general, but like what you specifically, yeah, I mean, how do you not get bored and like what do you like where do you want to take your personal journey or hobby to the in 2025?
That's a very good question that I do not know. Uh, I overall I enjoy doing this. Like it's kind of fun. It's
Yeah.
like Jake Adams always called his podcast Reef Therapy. Like for me, I love just
Hmm.
chatting reef. I think it's fun. I enjoy it. It's like a bit of a break from the crazy life for me. So I don't know.
Yep.
Hopefully, I'll find more excuses to keep growing the channel and find more fun guests and more topics. Like half the challenge for me now is like, what to talk about this week after doing hundreds and hundreds of live streams. Right? It's like, you know, what do you guys want to see and hear about and talk about? And what's random inspiration struck that week. But I don't know. I enjoy it. I think it's fun. I just on my YouTube dashboard I saw a little milestone of 10 million views, which is freaking crazy to think. 10 million views on
Yes.
reefing channels. So thank you guys.
Yes.
But yeah, it's super crazy. So I was like, oh, that was pretty cool. Good little milestone. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just gonna keep on doing it. It's fun. I enjoy the conversations. I could talk reefing all day. So if I got an excuse to do this, maybe if I had a chance to do more content, I would do it. And hopefully, as the kiddo gets a little bit older and I have a little more time, maybe I'll see what I can do to scale up. But on the non-direct reefing side, I've been like
Hmm.
slowly doing stuff to make like my streaming studio better. So like I got a newer camera now, which is better than the old one, and I put like sound panels on the roof to reduce echoes in here, and I'm gonna redo the back wall next. So I'm just like slowly plunking away at like improving the overall quality of content. And
Yeah.
then hopefully once I get a bit free time, I can start doing some more cool creative stuff again. But yeah, slowly but surely. Reefing, I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
really
It's
appreciate
fun.
that about your streams and just your content in general is the this attention to detail and continuously improving, which is I'm a big fan of.
Yeah. Likewise. Someone just commented too. Just noticed you both have Shure mics. We do. Good choice.
It's the only
Yeah.
way to go. So yes,
Yep. When
it's all for your listening pleasure.
exactly, right? It's like the amount of investment and all this stuff to, make the audio a bit better, make the video better, make it more crispy. I don't know. It's like it's kind of a hobby in itself, but
Hmm.
at the end of the day, I always try and slowly up the quality of things. So up the
I
quality of the
agree.
content and makes it more engaging, more enjoyable. Like no one wants to watch a video of some blurry blue tank that they can't see any details and stuff, right? So it's a better experience on both ends.
Yep.
Yep. Phil, you've been steady on a video a week and weekly live streams for the last 8 years. Yeah, that's insane. I feel guilty if I miss one, so it's like brainwash myself into the weekly requirements now. But yeah, no, it's fun. How about you? Any big changes for yourself for the upcoming future on the YouTube or treasure corals or personal side of the hobby?
Yeah, this is a very good question. I think I want to focus a lot more on aquatic log over their next few years for sure. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's an app that, or first it was a website, but now it's an app that I've been working on and off for I want to say over 10 years now, and it's still going strong. I mean, I got people always just signing up, and it's quite rewarding from that perspective. And a lot of things that we talked about the automation and and things like that. I'm really interested in trying on a little bit more. So that's one direction that I definitely want to continue going.
Hmm.
And I think the other one is really striking that, like hitting that sweet spot with my aquarium, where just everything is in the right place, everything is just at prime. Like it's a
Hmm.
moving target. Like you can never really reach that, but
And you can't get comfy there because it will only
no,
stay there for like a month and something will happen.
that's exactly right. So, but that's my
Hmm.
North Star, and
Yep.
I think I want to continue doing this. So those are probably the big things. Like you, I try to document. I don't do live streams as frequently, but I try to do a weekly video update of whatever I'm working on,
Nice.
and it is very rewarding from that perspective.
Hmm.
It's fun to go back and see. So those are my challenges for 2025, and
Nice.
not have a crash,
No, that's fair.
soul sucking crash of any kind. So.
So I semi question if this was a good idea or if I regret it now. But when I set up the NAS tank, I basically killed off all the rock and started fresh.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I've dealt with algae on it, and then I just dealt with cyano, and I had some dinos, and now I did
Mm-hmm.
some chemi clean the other day. And I was like, whatever, I just want to get rid of it. I'm tired of staring at it. So I did some chemi clean, and now the sand looks nice. But I have a bit. I don't know if it's chrysophytes or if it's freaking dinos. I haven't microscoped yet. But now there's some other stringy bits in there. It's just like. It's like going through all the new tank hurdles of sterilization again, which is a pain in the butt. So, yep.
Yeah, that's another idea for I guess a future company of some sort. Like if they can offer either a live rock or the bacteria, not in a
Mm-hmm.
bottle. Like I don't really believe in those things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure they do certain things, but they're still like you're looking at one or two strains kind of thing. Give
Yep.
me something that will solve that type of problems that you're talking about. Like that
Yeah.
would be fun.
Exactly right. Here's a handful of sand from a 20-year-old pristine pest-free established reef
Yeah.
tank to inoculate your sand bed. Like that'd be a sweet product. I would
Mm-hmm.
probably buy a pouch of the overly priced sand if I knew it was going to add a bunch of goodness to my tank and prevent a lot of
Yeah.
the weirdness. So
Yeah.
that's could be a good future of the hobby.
Yeah.
Ways to insta cycle with the goodness. But even with the aquabiomics type of stuff, right? Is there's all this data on it, but knowing what exactly does this do? Do we need it? Is it important? Like, sure, diversity is good, but how much benefit do you actually get out of it? So, be interesting.
Anecdotal.
I know. Um, I haven't decided yet, but on a random side note, I've debated starting a second YouTube channel of just like
Mm.
random techie slash other stuff that I have for interest that's not reefing. But I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. Haven't decided to have the free time for it, not yet, but maybe not.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you have to, no matter what you do,
Mm-hmm.
you have to give it attention and you have to give it time. And at this point, like in probably your life, my life, time is extremely scarce. So,
Yep.
if I won the lottery tomorrow, oh my God, like, I mean, I'd be doing every single thing I wanted to do, but that's
Mm-hmm.
not happening. So, you gotta be smart about like where you're gonna put your chips. So
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Very, very true. Reefkeeper. And Aptasia and fermented snails still come in after sterilizing the rocks. You know, they do. There's still an Aptasia or two that snuck in there that I doused, and then I don't know. See if there's any more in there. So far, I can't see any. But yeah, the little buggers. Like there's a couple that snuck into my nano, and those stupid little vermitids are everywhere now. So I threw a few bumblebees in there. So hopefully they'll take them out eventually. But yeah, it's all these
yeah.
little mini battles as part of the reef tank game. Yeah, homemade coral snowball bumblebees. Yeah, it absolutely works. It takes time, but it definitely works. I even have
Mm-hmm.
coral snow. I just gotta mix up some. Dun, dun, dun. Any other fun stuff for the future you can think of? Comes to mind?
Yeah, like I said, it's probably not having a crash. This would be the most rewarding thing, and not
Yep.
getting burnt out. I think the more I do this, the more I understand the ebbs and flows of
Mm.
this hobby. Like it's not static. You cannot maintain that level of passion
Yep.
towards those type of things. I think this is where like this is your secret weapon with your YouTube channel, right? Because you always get kind of invigorated or you get some new information, you're going to run around and try something else. Like I find it akin to visiting some of my friends. They can run the tank, but unless I show up and I like ooh and ah about their aquarium,
Mm.
they may kind of be on a downer. But then, if somebody comes over, same with me. Like if somebody comes over and then like we talk and drink coffee and talk about the aquarium, after that, I'm like, okay, I want to do a little bit more of this and
Yeah.
that. And that's being able to navigate this.
Hmm.
The average time in this hobby, I think, is 18 months or
Yeah.
even less. And which means that for every person that's been there for 3 to 5 months, there's most people are there for 6 months or 3 months or whatever it is, right? So the longevity of people that actually have been doing this for 10 years plus, there's only, I would guess, is like 5%, 3%, whatever it is. It's a very small number,
Oh,
and
the
there is a
hardcore
reason
is
for that.
watching right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The OGs. So yes.
Yeah, I know it's true. It's fun. Sucks. Oh, completely randomness. I've had 3 corals that have bit the dust in my new tank, all in the same section
Hmm.
of the tank, which I find really odd. The rest,
Flow, maybe,
no,
or
it's just, I have 4 MP40s on a 4 foot tank. It's like basically the same float
yeah,
all over the place.
yeah.
But yeah, it's weird. I don't know. It's one of those things. New tanks, the
Maybe
hurdles,
it's a bobbit worm.
something. I don't know. New tank curse. It's always, the first like 6 months of a tank.
Yeah.
There's up and downs. There's ebb and flows. Every time I do something like chemi clean or dose something, I'm always like, okay, this sledgehammer approach, what am I upsetting? What's going to be the next hurdle? It's
Yep.
all part of the reef tanks.
That is exactly right.
Yeah. Chaeto or carbon dosing, depends what you're going after. Chaeto's better for phosphates, not as much for nitrates. Carbon dosing is more for nitrates. So it depends what you're targeting there, Crazy Bear. Now, earlier you talked about the refugium and lowering nutrients, and there was also a comment in the chat about their tank. They said their tank looked better once they stopped having a refugium. Now,
I
just,
would probably agree with that.
yeah, just kind of thoughts on that one is refugiums suck out trace elements. They're very good
Yeah.
at, iron and molybdenum and a bunch of the other stuff like that. There's a couple more, but those are the two that always stick out in my mind. So as your algae grows, it's sucking out these trace elements. And if you're not supplementing them
Mm-hmm.
back, you could be starving your corals out of certain trace elements. So that is one
Mm-hmm.
reason why a refugium could take away some color from your coral because it's stealing their trace elements. And if you supplement them, then that's good for refugium and your corals. But that's just one
Yeah.
thought if you're having that experience.
I would 100% agree with that, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a trade-off. So you will get a little bit more of pH, and you will get a little bit, control of nutrients,
Mm-hmm.
but that would be the trade-off.
Yep. What's your thoughts on ICPs? Do you do them very often? Do you think it's something that more people should do or don't really care?
I was on that wagon for a while. Like I was all team ICP for a few months, but then honestly, I want the reef that like I don't want to keep tweaking things anymore. Like I want to simplify this part of my life. I understand the appeal. I also understand, while some folks have all those, bottles, the
Mm-hmm.
moonshiner, all of that stuff, but I definitely know that this is not for me. Like, I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
I was a retired, individual, like already done like tons of time and lots of, disposable income, I
Mm-hmm.
would consider doing those type of things. But right now, I don't want to have a regimen where every day I'm adding 3 drops of X and
Yep.
whatever it is there. So I better not think about it and just, I'm a big believer in water changes.
Yeah. I did it for a while and the tank did look phenomenal while I was doing it. But you're also
For sure.
staring at your tank every day and paying more attention to it versus coasting and,
Yes.
doing stuff
Yeah.
randomly. And I think that's a chunk of
Yeah.
it. I've
Yeah.
been meaning to send one in for like
But
3 months now. But at the same time, I was
yeah.
like,
So
I'll just do a big water change. It'll reset stuff a little bit. But yeah,
yeah.
it's a struggle.
And it's not cheap, right? I mean, the hobby adds up after a while. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything adds up, and you don't want to be spending $500 a month on your aquarium, right?
No, that's my other like internal debate all the time of all the different things that you can do, right? It's like, oh yeah, you can do
Yeah.
all this, like filter rollers. Love a filter roller, but it's an expense. Got to replace it every few months. Like, all these things have a certain cost to it. So it's like they save you time, but it makes it a little more
Yeah.
expensive, right?
Well, the easiest one is I always enjoy those stories about, person starts with one type of lighting, but then they feel like, okay, I need to add a little bit more of this. And then after a while, you run like three different types of lights because, you just kind of went overboard. Or
Mm-hmm.
you go with, okay, I have the calcium reactor, but it's lowering my pH. So now I'm going to do the two-part, but also I'm going to add the calcuwasser. And now it's
Mm-hmm.
so easy to add this, and when you are in the process of doing it, it makes perfect sense.
Yep.
But now you've got three different things that you need to watch and watch out. So it's ebbs and flows of this hobby.
No, that's true. Okay, Richard Colombo, what's your opinion to pull the reds out on a tenuous? Do you think there's any certain elements or anything specific that does the red?
Not really. I know that for a while it was potassium. I think that was considered this and that. Again, anecdotal. I personally don't really believe that too much. I think there has to be enough nutrients and trace elements in the first place, and then probably just more more light. Your coral will definitely change from that perspective.
I still
But
remember in my earlier days of reefing, I was dosing the Red Sea ABCD, like the 4 little trace element bottles, and I was
yeah.
overdosing it.
Mm-hmm.
And certain corals became overly red, and they were starting to lose the
Mm.
oranges and stuff from whatever
Mm.
was in one of those bottles was basically taking it over. So, I mean,
Yeah.
overdosing certain elements can change the colors as well, for better or for
Yeah. So
worse.
it clearly is possible. Just
Mhm.
Yeah, I would ask somebody who's like a true coral farmer, tweaker kind of thing. So, but
Well,
definitely,
the problem
like,
is though, you're like, yeah, my reds are awesome, but then all my
yeah,
oranges and yellows are losing color and they're turning red. It's you got to think of the
yeah,
system as a whole and not change something for
yes,
one coral and affect all the
yes,
corals. And I think that's
yes,
another big consideration.
yes. One thing I saw objectively, I think, is that the par definitely changes the coloration.
Hmm.
Starting from like the OGs of like Red Planet, for example, you give it less par, it becomes more green, and then you get it up there, it becomes more red. That is well documented and reproduced
Hmm.
in tons of aquariums. I can do this any day and get the same result. So that is one good path to get the best possible coloration of your
Hmm.
coral. And again, it's your time. So basically, being able to watch your coral, give it enough time, maintain stable parameters, and then tweak it and move it and observe it.
Yeah.
So that's the key.
Now, if you want to play the super high par game, you
Yeah.
also need more nutrients to feed your corals, and you also need
Yes.
more flow to feed those nutrients slash take away the bad stuff. So that's the other consideration is if you are doing the super high par game, you need to up the other stuff as well to kind of keep stuff in balance.
Yes, but I would bet that even like on your show, you must have had at least a couple of folks that subscribe to the opposite thought process. Where like I've heard it so many times from experienced reefers that think that high light
Hmm.
means you need to lower your nutrients. I've heard this from a few folks,
I've heard both
which
ends.
which doesn't make sense to me,
I, I
but that's what they believe.
I've heard both. I think you need more
Yeah,
nutrients and more flow personally if you have super
agree,
high par.
but that's exactly my point.
Yeah,
That we believe this way. There's some people that kind of think the opposite, and
but that's
while
the
we
great
think
thing about
we're
these
correct,
hobbies. Maybe they both
yeah.
work. What works for one person may or may not work for another. But I don't know.
Oh my God! So yeah,
That's the best part of this is you are
yes,
always learning. If
yes,
you like to dive into something and you have that
yes,
personality, like you're
yes,
always learning reef keeping, and you're never gonna
yes,
know it all.
yes,
And if someone tells
yes.
you they know it all, they're lying. So yeah, it's fun. Well, I think it was a good chat today, Dimitri.
Yeah, thanks, Devin.
Likewise. And if anyone wants to check out Dimitri's YouTube channel, it is linked to the description. So give that clickety click. Check it out because you do all kinds of random, interesting experiments, which I always appreciate. And yeah, that's all. As always, guys, you enjoyed it, hit that like button. You're new, make sure you subscribe. I appreciate everyone hanging out today. If you have any special requests for future stream topics, let me know in the comments below afterwards. And yeah, we will see you guys on the next video.
Sounds good. Thanks, Devin.